said 45, but on the schedule it says 30.
9:30.
Yeah, so I think you're
messed up.
ready.
Oh, do you think I'm ready?
I think you're ready.
I'm ready.
You're ready.
What do you say, guys? Are we ready?
Yoo-hoo!
Used to meetings.
I'm sorry?
I'm used to meetings.
You're used to meetings.
So-
Strangers in the night. I'm here all week.
No, you're here all day.
I'm here all day. Yes, I am. Without a chair. I mean, we got these, but you know, a stool would be nice, but that's okay. I'll just like lean up against the wall when I need to, because I'm already feeling a little backy. Okay. Okay, guys, let's go ahead and get started. Even if they said 45, we can always use the extra time.
Get away from the speaker.
I am the speaker.
Oh, crud.
Okay, so I'll start off by saying, how many of you guys plan to be with me all day?
Yeah, mostly.
Mostly? Okay. So we're going to take you from not even being able to spell PowerShell to hopefully writing custom classes, which is my absolute favorite topic because almost nobody does custom classes in PowerShell, and it's so incredibly useful, and it's really going to cut your coding down and make it more readable, if not just ensure your job, because the guy coming in after you won't be able to do anything with it. I'm Sean, if you saw on the schedule. How many of you have not seen me speak before? All right, I'm going to say sorry.
It's a joke.
in advance. They were talking about the comment cards, so just go ahead and fill those out and pass them up here before we get started. I'm going to do my best to keep, I was going to say to keep you awake, but I'm going to do my best to keep from falling asleep on myself. So this is me. I've been doing SQL for 6 months now, so I know everything there is to know. I don't know what that is.
No, I'm not mad at you.
Oh, I'm by another damn...
I'm gonna turn it off. Calm down.
So, I am a certified master in SQL. I actually started SQL back in '95. Been doing high-end databases and coding ever since. I've got tons of free training videos at midnightdba.com, tons of PowerShell stuff, tons of SQL stuff. Everything's 100% free. We won't even ask you for a login or anything. Just go there, and you can see that also on YouTube/midnightdba. And I am the chief architect and whatever you want to call me for Minionware Software, where we make SQL management software called Minion Enterprise. It allows you to basically run your whole shop from a single place. So centralized in estate management. And our free tools, one of them didn't make it on here, for reindex, backup, and CheckDB, and they are the most complete tools on the planet, paid or free. And these are completely free. We won't even ask you for an email. I'm gonna get off that because I can talk about those and have all day long. So, but just know that especially our backup tools,
I'm gonna see.
yeah,
Go ahead.
the most complete feature-wise and configurability and everything, we're doing things nobody else has even thought of. Okay, and this is my assistant, Jen. She's going to be walking around doing, I'm not sure what, if y'all have questions and you don't want to disturb the group. And that's something I wanted to say real quick. I'm not usually like this, but we're going to go ahead and set up.
I'll go get help.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and set up a completely safe zone today where there are no stupid questions. If you have the question, other people probably do too. If there's, yes.
Can we interrupt you?
No.
Oh.
If there's something you don't understand, tell me. We'll take the time, okay? The thing that's in the schedule, what we're gonna cover in every session, is a loose outline for me. I want you to walk away knowing enough about PowerShell to be able to read blogs and be able to look at code and have a general idea of what's going on. I cannot teach you 15 years of PowerShell in a single day. So we're gonna go slower and make sure that you really understand these topics. When I teach PowerShell to DBAs, like at a gig, when I'm like the head of a team or something, I give classes every single day to my team for like a year. And even then, they still have tons of questions. So this is very, and that's very focused, personalized attention, right? But if there is something you don't get, it's your fault if you don't understand it, because I will take the time to show it to you.
Project. Sorry.
They're all right here. Besides, don't you think it's best if they can't hear me?
Huh?
All right. Let's get past the vanity crap. That's you. And let's talk about some PowerShell. I don't think I'm going to be vlogging my time today. Turn that off. Okay, so how many of you have any experience at all in PowerShell? How many don't have anything whatsoever? Perfect. And the ones that have any experience at all, do you consider yourselves fairly decent, low level, just done a couple things from the internet?
I used to be.
One of the things about starting with PowerShell is when you try and start it and you're trying to learn, it seems like you already know so many other things, be able to use it, that it's difficult to make progress. I've never actually heard that before, but we'll cover that stuff today. I hope. If there is something you don't get how I got from A to B, let me know. Okay, so PowerShell, just another damn scripting language, right? Because we've got VB script and Python, and Python's really big these days, right? The thing that makes PowerShell such a big deal, everybody in here is a data guy, right? Okay, good, because I use a lot of SQL analogies to get my points across, right? So the thing that makes PowerShell such a big deal is that it's written in .NET, which means that it supports all of the .NET classes and a lot of the methodologies. When I teach PowerShell to a database team, the last time I taught this to a full database team was like a year and a half ago, was when I left that gig. And I taught them PowerShell for a year before starting them on C#. PowerShell and C# have very, very similar syntax. So if you get good at this, which is why I teach the custom classes later on, because once you learn those concepts and you start seeing how you build custom classes in PowerShell, it's a step to get into C# instead of a huge leap over a table. So a lot of the concepts carry over. It doesn't have nearly as much functionality as C# classes do. But that's what makes it a stepping point, right? Not a, all right? So, the thing that you're gonna hear me say today, there are some things that I'm gonna drive home that I just want you to remember. I'm gonna say them 100 times. And one of them is gonna be the more things change, the more they stay the same. That is the thing I love about PowerShell. Now, they're taking VB out of Windows, finally, right? But in the old VB days, there was a difference in the way that you coded, right? If you were coding on a local box, you wrote a script a certain way. But if that VB script was in, say, a web page, you had to script it a different way. Or if you were working with something else, you had to script it a different way, right? But if you learn the basics of PowerShell, the basics never go away. If I'm coding against Windows, if I'm coding against Office 365, or Exchange proper, or SQL, or Oracle, or IIS, or anything, the language stays the same. How you use it stays the same. So you're not gonna have to worry about, oh, well, how do I do this and how do I do that? No, it's the exact same all the way across the board. So with that little bit of intro into PowerShell, let's start coding. I don't have any slides. I never use slides. You saw I had to dig out my vanity slide just all right. So we're just gonna do code today. All right. So
Oh, I have a question.
yeah.
So, is this gonna be, cause I didn't bring my computer, is this gonna be like online for us to view later?
Okay, so
I'm actually broadcasting this right now to YouTube, to our YouTube channel. So
Okay.
yes, I don't know how clear the code will be, but
That's fine.
it's a new phone, should be okay.
Okay.
but I will say
Cool.
that on Midnight DBA, I've got PowerShell out the yin yang, including several recorded beginning sessions
And a 6-part class.
and a 6-part class on custom classes. And it's all free.
No, you're good.
I was just concerned because I wasn't aware that I was supposed to bring my laptop.
No, you don't have to.
No, you don't have to. Okay, so I like to start people out with the big easy. Commandlets. Jeffrey Snover at Microsoft, who created PowerShell, I asked him once, why did you call them commandlets when they're just commands?
I know.
And he said, searchability. If you Google command, what are you gonna get?
All kinds of
But
bash.
if you
and
Google
everything
something
down
else
the
like
line.
commandlet, you're gonna get PowerShell stuff.
For those not familiar, cmdlets.
Yeah. So, we've got commandlets. Think of commandlets as
Little commands.
SPs. Because I type one little thing, it goes behind the scenes, does a lot of .NET-y stuff, and then gives me things, right? So we're gonna start with the easiest one, the one that everybody starts with. We're gonna start with get service. So, and that's the line completion in the new editor, and the new shell. So, oh yeah, if you're not using Windows Terminal, use Windows Terminal. It's the bomb. If somebody reminds me later, I'll walk you through a couple features that are really cool. You'll notice that PowerShell has some standards. Some of the teams have, I'm not gonna say broken, we'll say bent the standards a little, and you'll get a warning if you run their commandlets. But it's just a warning on naming convention, right? So you'll see every commandlet in PowerShell is noun-verb.
Okay.
Get service, out, read something, write something, right? So it's always verb-noun. Always, I'm gonna say, few exceptions. But when you do get those warnings, and I think it was from the Office team, right? It'll just say, you know, this commandlet doesn't follow the naming convention. So what? Just run the stupid thing, right? It'll run. Don't worry, right? Okay, so when I call get service, by default, and I hit enter and not shift, then I get a list of the services that are running on the box. And I got one service here that can't be queried for some reason or another. Permission denied, right?
So that will be verb noun, but not necessarily verb object? Not particularly verb object?
What do you mean? Nouns are objects, so what do you mean?
Well, objects are nouns.
Yeah.
Will that noun always be an object?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
And I say that because I don't have the entire thing, right?
Okay. Because
So-
it seems like for OO, it would conform to that convention, that you're doing something with something that
Yeah.
can be an object.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're gonna talk about objects soon enough. So, I can get a list of services running on the box by simply running this commandlet /sp, right? I'm gonna try to be SQL-y for you guys today. And that works exactly how SPs work, right? It takes parameters. I can pass it parameters. We'll get into parameters a little bit later. Let's look at another commandlet that everybody always starts with. Get process. Boom, you got a list of processes on the box. I've moved back up into services, there we go. With my headers and all of that, right? Now PowerShell is an extremely rich language. So I can't possibly tell you everything you need to know about it today. But we are gonna talk about this default list that gets sent out when we start talking about objects. And again, it does take parameters, so you can like limit it to, you know, a process name or a PID or something like that. Any questions on that so far? Pretty simple, right? You're just typing a commandlet name. And there are hundreds, if not thousands of commandlets by now. It's obscene how many commandlets there are, right?
Yes.
But we are going to, let's get into variables a little bit first, and then we'll get into pipelines. So I'm gonna clear the screen with a little CLS action there. So variables in PowerShell. They start with a $, and then they have normal variable naming stuff, right? So I'm just gonna say A, and I can define A, and I'll say equals 5. Perfect, I just assigned a variable. If I wanna see it, you don't have to do a print statement or anything, just type the name of the variable, and it'll print it to the screen. Everybody's good with that? Perfect. Same thing with, I'll say B equals, sure, let's go with yesterday. And I want to type it. I want to print it out to the screen. I can print it out to the screen. Beautiful. Now, you get some really good stuff with variables in PowerShell. I think now is, I might be getting ahead of myself, but it doesn't really matter. We're gonna be more free-flowing today. Let's talk about concatenation.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Do variables persist in your session or not?
Yeah, because I can go back here and do A again. Yeah, so they do persist in the session. Almost everything in PowerShell, not almost, I'm gonna say everything in PowerShell is per session. So if I open up another one of these, I'll get a completely different, right? I won't have A in there. Okay, let me get rid of that one. Concatenation. In SQL, when you want to concatenate two strings, you have to say string plus string, right? Or @SQL equals @SQL plus string, right? You have to keep this ridiculous string building exercise that gets really, really confusing, right? The more single ticks and everything you want to add, it gets worse and worse and worse, right?
If you're using regex,
Yeah.
then it adds that
Complexity.
increased complexity.
Yeah, regex is another story. Okay, so, but if I want to concatenate these two together in PowerShell, all I have to do is put my quotes and then say A and B. And you notice how one of these is a string and one of them is an integer, and they still come out just fine. PowerShell knows that, oh, it's in quotes, so you want to print it, right? So it gives you the value of that variable. I'm gonna let that soak in for a little bit before I get to the oh my God part, right? Yeah.
But then it's not going to take your integer 5 and turn it into a string, will it?
Well, no, it doesn't touch the variable itself. No, that's just for printing purposes. It knows that you want the value. Okay? Now,
if I wanted that in some kind of single quotes, right, then I can just surround that with ticks. And I get that. Okay, so this seems really, really basic, and it is. But you are gonna use this all the time. All the time. There is a little bit of a caveat here when we start talking about the difference between single quotes and double quotes. We're gonna get into the really big one when we get into objects. But for now, we're gonna say that double quotes are what we call interpolated strings, which means that it pulls the value out and gives you the value. And single ticks are literal strings. So you can see that it prints the name of the variable itself. It does not interpolate the name of that string into a value, it just does what it's told. So, but when you're doing this, you can see that I've got single ticks here, but I still got the value. Why is that? If single ticks are literals. Yes, it is the outermost quotes that define how the entire string is going to be done. Cool?
When you say the outermost,
Uh-huh.
are you talking about? the
These guys.
end? Right? Okay, I see.
Outers,
Inners, yeah.
inners.
I'm having a little trouble seeing the screen, so I was
Ah.
thinking it all kind of blends together.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Do feel free to move up if it'll help.
Yeah, I might.
No, you sit where you are.
Huh? I think I will.
He forgot to announce that he is hilarious.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Okay.
I think I will though, because I can't really see that green from there.
So now let's talk about pipelines. If you think you're going to use variables a lot and string manipulation a lot, you're going to use pipelines even more. Pipelines come from Bash.
I like Bash.
Ah, you're going to see some similarities because the creator of PowerShell, Jeffrey Snover, was a big Bash guy. And so he took it and ran with it and kept the things that he liked and then changed things
When I
that he
first
didn't.
started learning the command line, I learned on Bash.
There
And
you
of
go.
course, now we use both,
So you'll know pipelines then.
Yeah.
So the pipeline, anybody here do SIS? Do like, no ETLs? Okay. Anybody here
There
ever
he
seen
is,
a,
but he's in- I don't know.
anybody here ever seen a relay race
Yes.
with the baton?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Same thing. When I use a, go ahead. Go ahead.
I know I
There we
did that
go.
noise.
Whenever I have an object like $A and I want to send it as input to something else, I pipe it to there. And you can do that in old DOS too, right? Kind of with the double beaks, right? Take that, send it to a file, right? So what it's doing is it's doing a handoff. So I take A and I say I want to pipe it to this one. And this one over here knows that that's the input, and it can take its output and send it to something else. And it can take its output and send it to something else. And you can just chain these pipes along, right? So let's see what that looks like. Well, I mean, it's a pipeline, so it's probably going to be a pipe, right? So let's do something simple. We don't have to do A. Let's do today and pipe that to another commandlet out file. This was such a godsend when PowerShell first came out because all we had before was VB script, and writing something to a file is a good half a page of code.
Mm-hmm.
It was obscene, right? But you notice how they do a lot of work for you here. Now all I have to do is what? Give it a file name.
I'll say, no, that. And I'll say, oh. Did I do a comma there? I did, didn't I? Dot. There we go. So I'm taking today, I'm gonna pipe it to the out file and define the file that I want it to go to. Done. Just created a file with its only contents being today.
Is that a period before the slash today? Or
I'm sorry?
Is that a period or comma before slash today?
That's a period. This is a relative path,
Okay.
which means put it in the current folder. So I could do something like this, right? I think I could do that. Yep. There we go. So I can just open it if I want to. Okay. Now, not only text and variables and stuff, right? I can pipe commandlets. So let's do this. Let's say get service, pipe it to out file. I wish I'd stopped that. And we'll say services.text.
Now, I'm gonna guess that's what somebody would start doing if they wanted to start scripting, is they would start piping the commandlets to a file, and then they've got a script going.
Well, I'm piping the results to a file.
Okay.
So if I come here, well, no, I'll just do it this way. I'll just say, oh, now you open, really? Dot whack. I'll put the results to a file. And that's how easy it is to put stuff in a file. Now, we're not gonna put stuff in a file very often, are we? Why do you think we're not gonna put stuff in a file very often?
Because it accumulates incredibly fast.
Sure.
Call me teacher.
Go ahead.
Because we're DBAs.
Yes, we're not flat file admins, right? We're database admins. We like working with databases, right?
Yes, we do.
Because let's look at that file one more time. I can just hit the up arrow and it'll give me my last command, and I can go through all my commands like that if I want to. So let's look at this. Okay, great. What am I gonna do with that? I got 20 boxes, I got 500 boxes, I got 1,000 boxes, and I'm getting the services. Now what am I gonna do? Write something else that goes through and opens all those files and regexes all of that stuff to find something? Because that's just a puke of text, right? It's nicely formatted puke, but it's still just a puke of text, right? So we're not gonna do stuff there very often at all. I'll do that for testing or something, right? But never in production will you see me write something to a file like that. Very rarely, if I'm writing like a trigger file or something, right?
Or a nice report.
Yeah.
On saving.
But it's good to know how to do that because I do have stuff that creates, that goes through the database and queries a bunch of stuff and then creates like HTML documents to put on a SharePoint or something like that, right? So
That's what I said.
anyway, okay. And of course, I've got my 3 services here that for some reason I don't have access to, and it just, notice how it gave me the error and moved on. It didn't stop, right? I can make it stop. I don't want to do that, right? Most of the time when I get those errors, okay, fine, I don't have permission. I just shut up and move on, right? So, let me ask you, what's the difference between single and double quotes? Wrong.
The double quotes gets the value where the single quotes does the action.
Right. Anybody know what that's called? The double quotes? Interpolation. Very good. Right. And the single quotes are called? Literals. Yes.
Alrighty. And what's a commandlet?
A command in PowerShell?
Sure, yeah. It's like an SP, right? Cool. And how do you print a variable to the screen?
$sign and.
It's actually on the screen.
Oh, I was gonna say, $sign, give it,
Yeah,
verbal and then,
yeah, just put the var name and
yeah.
hit enter, right?
Yeah.
Not shift, like
Enter,
I do,
yeah,
but
I
enter.
know, I do share.
So I'll say I'm gonna mistype a lot of things today because the keyboard I use at home is very different from this one. I've remapped a bunch of the keys, and so I've got a lot of muscle memory that, so anyway,
This is stuff, yeah.
yeah, and yeah.
First stupid question, our safe space, what are you pushing on the keyboard to get the pipe? To do the pipe?
Yes,
Oh,
that is,
It's right above the enter key, it's shift backslash.
yeah, it's right under backspace.
Okay.
For people that don't use pipes very often, that's not a dumb question at all. You had something?
Yeah, so I have a fundamental misunderstanding of the difference between write host and write output. Can you describe and define the difference between those two? And when you actually do $A on the terminal, is that a write host or write output? Realize you haven't covered those commandlets yet, but this is.
Right. So write host and write output are usually used, I would say that this one is a write host behind the scenes, but I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I know, because AI never gives a good answer for that one either.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but the short answer is, who cares?
Because they actually print out different.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, but when I'm printing a variable to a screen, who cares? But I think this one's a write host. As far as write output, I don't use it often enough I usually use write host. So I'm not really super familiar with the strict differences between write host and write output, except write output may be on a different stream.
Well, the thing is, you get differences when you're working with processes that you start with processes. That's what
Right.
I ask. And so different things will be printed in those contexts and never understood.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And I do most of my work in the GUI anyway, so. Okay, so what was I saying before?
Single quotes and double quotes.
Single quotes and double quotes, right.
What are single quotes?
Okay.
Single quotes to the action. Or
And-
single quotes at the literal.
And so we all understand here the pipeline, right? I take this, it has an output, it sends that output to this as input, which takes a parameter. It's got more parameters, but this is the basics. And then it just does it, right? So now's time to talk about objects. I don't think we can go any further without talking about objects. We're gonna talk about objects and contractual programming and all that stuff all day long. Let's start with objects. So everything in PowerShell is an object. I'm gonna say that a lot today too. Everything is an object. That variable is an object. So what does it mean for something to be an object? Well, what does it mean? The sticker's an object. What does that mean? It means it's got properties, right? What properties does it have? It's oval, so it's got shape. It's flat, so it's got, we call it depth.
Dimension, yeah.
That would be depth, right? It's got height, it's got width, it's got color, it's got text, right? That's what I was trying to think of. And more and more and more, right? Can it fly? Probably, but not very far, right? Can it bend?
Yeah.
Sure. What's the big thing it can do? What's the big verb it can do? Stick. Very nice.
It's in the name.
It's in the name, right? So objects have properties, and they have verbs as well. Stick is a verb, right?
through the air is a verb, right? But the properties themselves are what it looks like. They're things that describe it. So when I have an object in PowerShell, you're gonna learn your first biggie here, right? Get member is another commandlet. And you are going to live in get member. I've been doing PowerShell for a decade and a half now, and I'm still in get member several times a day when I code. It's just where you're gonna live, because it tells you the properties of the object and the type of object that you're dealing with. So let's take a look at one of these variables that we created here, and let's say cache A, and we're gonna pipe that to get dash member.
So do you have to do get and set, get member and set? Or we're not there yet?
No,
Okay.
no, we're gonna get to that,
Okay.
I think. Yeah, probably.
Alright. So when you create an object, you want to create an object of the kind of object that it is. Like if we want to make a new sticker that says something different.
Now you're getting into later in the day.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where the custom classes come in. You're gonna love it. So, get dash member. You'll never see me type that again, because the alias is GM, and that's what everybody uses. So, to get the members of that object, I type the object and pipe it to GM. And you'll hear me say that a lot. Just send it to GM or do a GM on it, something like that, right? So it starts by telling me the type of object it is. It is an int32. Because I did A, right? That was the value of 5, right? So it's an int32. The members themselves are going to change per object, because every object doesn't have the same parameters, right? You wouldn't take a bird and say flight speed and put flight speed on a chair, right? I mean, I suppose flight speed is gonna, it's gonna be determined by who's throwing it, but that still isn't flying, right? That's just like falling with force, right? So the members of an object are both the methods and the properties. There are no properties here, right? But the methods are the verbs. So there would be a stick method for our sticker, right? An unstick method, which would always be like nothing, right? Because hopefully it's never gonna unstick. But here, for an integer, you don't have too much, but you have some conversions here, right? I want to send it to string or to single, I want to convert it to 16 or to 32 or something like that, right? So, and you can try to format it a certain way, right? So it's got these, but I mean, if you think about it, what are some properties that an integer would have? Not much, it's just a number, right? What are you gonna do, put the number of digits in there? That's pointless, right? So let's look at something now that does have a little bit more, just a touch more. And let's look at our string variable. I'm gonna see if I can widen this a little bit. Well, for starters, you can see it's a string. So we'll automatically have a different type. We have a lot of the same stuff here, right? But we do have one property, length. What else do you need to know about the thing, right? How many characters are in it? I don't know. What else do you need to know? Probably nothing, right?
In this case, would you want to know what character set it comes from? Because different character sets will make different strings. And that's not here in this
No,
set
because
of properties?
no, because this is going to be a generic string array,
So
or a generic string object.
But you can put any kind of characters that you want.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's not like SQL where you're extremely limited and you have to like, have to like say what type of character set it's gonna be. But now let's look at something a little bit more interesting. And I'm gonna say get service and pipe that to a get member. Do you think get service is an object?
No, the service is the object.
Well, let's see. You're right. What does it return? Right? What does it return? It returns a service controller type. That's the type of object it is. This kind of thing, what a service controller type is going to make a lot more sense to you when we get into the custom classes later. And after lunch, you're gonna understand what all this stuff means. But look, I've got methods and properties here. A whole list of all of them, right? I can start and stop the service right here. I can wait for some status. I've never used that. I can pause the service. Ooh. Anybody know what pausing a service means? Like, if you pause the SQL service, it means that it will shut down when everybody finishes doing what they're doing. It's going to let all the transactions go first, as opposed to stopping will just bam, just a hard stop, right? So that's the difference. I can refresh the service. I've never used that either. But what properties does a service have? Well, can it be stopped? Can it be shut down? Right? It can only be stopped if it's running. It can only be shut down if it's running. I can see the display name, the machine name, the service handle, the service name, all kinds of things, right? The status, ooh, that's important, right? So services are objects that have verbs, which are methods, things that you can do to them, or sometimes even things that you can ask them to do, right? And properties, things that describe them. What is the name of this service? What is the status of this service? And so on, right? And if we look at another object, now I'm spending a lot of time on this, because if you don't understand this, you're not going to understand PowerShell, because you're going to use this stuff all the time. If you want to do something with a service, or I'm going to say if you want to do something with an object, right, and you don't know what you can do with it, you're going to do a GMM on it, and you're going to see what you can and can't do, period. But let's do one more, and let's go back to our get process, and let's do a GM on that one. Comes up as it sends me a process object. And and it even shows me some alias properties and whatnot, right? But I've got these lovely methods here, things that I can do. Look at that. Ooh, I can kill it. Of course you can kill it. But I can refresh and restart. I've never used refresh. I still don't really know what that means. I can wait for stuff. I can start it. But look at all the properties I have. A lot of properties. Main window title, max working set, min working set, the modules and page size stuff, right? Private memory, 64, safe handle, session ID. So all of these kinds of things that you can do. And you notice how a lot of them are completely different than services, right? Why is that? Because a chair is not a sticker, right? It can be sticky, right? But a chair is not a sticker. There are two completely different types of objects. One is a service object, one is a process object. They've got different members, right? And remember, the members are the combination of the methods and the properties. Now, over here, for the properties, I can work with some of these things, right? So if you think about it, I need to get information on some of these guys.
and I need to say, I would like to set the page memory size, right? Do you think I can do that? No, I can't. Because over here, it tells me that I can only get it. I can only read it. If it says get and set, like processor affinity, that means I can read it and write it. So I can set the processor affinity, but I can't say, where was that one I saw earlier? Main window title. So let's say I'm running like a notepad, right? I can't change the window title from notepad to Sean's notes, right? The program's the program. I can't change that. So you notice how that only has a get. So this tells you whether you're allowed to change these properties on certain objects or not. And you can see that a lot better here. Let me think. No, never mind. And so everything has everything has members because everything is an object, right? So even if I were to do something like pull up a list of files and folders, I've got files and folders. But you notice how these guys are the folders, I think. Yep, these guys are the folders. These guys are the files. The new editor colors them for me, right? But if I do a GM on that, so I'll just say directory, pipe it to GM, I'm gonna get two types of objects. I'm gonna get one for the file info and one for the directory info because there are both of those types in there, right? It returns files and folders. So I'm gonna get both of them returned. And look at the kind of stuff I can do for directories, right? I've got all these methods. I can get the files, I can get the directories in there. I can move it somewhere, all of that kind of stuff, right? But I can also get the full name, the extension, that one's probably carried over from the other one. I can get last write time, I can get the parent, I can get the root, the base name, all kinds of things you can get on file. So if you're gonna end up pulling stuff from files or putting stuff to files, you're not gonna get around these two guys right here, right? Same thing with files. I can get all this stuff, I can check if it exists, right? I can get its directory name, and so on and so on. So I can get its extension, I can get all kinds of things because, and probably the size too, somewhere. Length. Length is gonna be the size, if it's a file. I think they should have gone with size myself, but eh. So, everything has properties. And everything is an object. And if you think in ways of objects, so I'm gonna take this object, I'm gonna send this services object to this object, right? Then you're gonna go far if you think it's objects and not just text being passed around. And that's the thing about the pipeline, is as things go through the pipeline, as I pipe from one commandlet to another commandlet to another commandlet, you're not passing the text around. You're actually passing the live object through. And we're gonna see that here in just a minute, in just a couple minutes, really. Okay, so now that we know about objects and we know about properties, let's go back to our default view. So let me clear the screen again to make things easier. Let's do get process, and so I've got this default view with 7 columns, right? 2, 4, 6, 7. This one's kind of hidden, right? So it's got 7 columns. Think of that as a view in SQL. They've taken the things that they think you want to see the most and given them to you as a default view. But if you've got a view, if you've got a table with 40 columns and a view that only returns, say, 5 of them, could you ever see those other 35 columns?
If you're doing SQL, yes. you could-
Sure, just query the table, right? So this is kind of the same thing. We're going to create our own table here. So let's go back to the GM real quick. Get process, I guess I'll just have to type it. It's too far up. And I've got all these other properties that I could see. How do I see those if I want to? And get away from that default view, right? So oddly enough, I'm going to say get process, and I'm going to pipe that to a format table. That's the last time you'll see me type that, because we always just say FT. So I'm going to pipe that to a format table, but now I got to tell the table what columns I want. And I've got all of these properties to pick from. Okay? So I'm going to say, let's go with, is there a name here? Is there a process name? You see it? Here it is. Process name. I'm just going to grab that. So all I want is process name, comma, and let's say working set. Why not? There we go. And I've got process name and working set. So I can see any of the properties I want to. Right? Now, if I want to see just one property, of course I can do that like this. But the problem with this is that now we've got, where is it? Well, I'll just redo the command. Now I've piped this to a format table. And I said earlier that the objects move through the pipeline intact, right? And it does. It goes from get process to output a process object, which gets added as a format table object as the input to that, which then turns around and outputs a table, right? So what's the status of the get process object now? Is it still a process object?
Yes.
No, because it was used as input to the format table, and now you've got a format table object that's got all kinds of things. It's got several types in there. It's got rows and it's got headers and footers and stuff like that, right? So if you were to like if we were to like take away process name and pipe that to a GM, you would see 3 or 4 or 5 different types of objects come up as part of the format table, right? So your get process, your process object that you started with is gone because you've changed it. You piped it to something that changed it. Because what else are you going to do when you format table? You're saying that you want to see it on the screen, right? Nothing left to do, right? You want to see it on the screen? Great. Can I take it and store it as that object and then parse stuff out? Sure, but no. You'd have to regex it, right? I mean, there's just no point, right? So, you will use format table a lot as well, but format table is only for your eyes only, right? Once it's done, the computer can effectively do nothing else with it. So it's only for you to like say, I want to check on the backups. Bam, 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 bam. Format table. Oh, okay. Got it? Perfect. Anybody have any questions on that before I move on? I've got 7 minutes to change your lives. No? Okay, good. Is that a...
Well, yeah, I am actually kind of curious. Is this your preference? Is there a reason why you don't select object and then pipe it out to your output of choice? Is that just a personal preference of yours?
ask that again.
Is it a personal preference to not do a select object in order to grab the properties and then format table? Is that just your preference? So get process, select object dash process, process name and command line, for example, then out, and then pipe to format table.
Oh, so you're saying like put a select in between there?
Yeah, is that just a preference?
There's no reason to put a select in there if you're gonna end up in a format table.
Okay. And that's just
It does nothing for you.
okay.
The only reason you would use a select, so let's say, because you saw how many properties there were here, right? The only reason to do a select is to preserve the object type. So what I'm saying here, and I'll show you what he's asking. He's asking if it's a personal preference why I don't use another, commandlet, there you go. And say, I want to say process name.
And then pipe it again to format table.
Name, and then pipe it to format table, and then that would give me, I'll just do that, right? Because I assume anything that comes through the select I want to see in the table, right? He's asking why I don't do that. Except I need to pipe it first, don't I? Nope, I did pipe it. Okay. There we go. Okay, so that does the same thing. I end up with the format table in the end, right?
It's just more steps.
It's just more steps, right? The only reason to do that is to select it and keep my object. So that select object commandlet tells it which properties you want to see, but since I'm not sending it to a format table, since I'm just sending it through and telling it which properties I want to see, it maintains my object so I can work with it, right? It's the same as like with ETL, right? If I'm reading from a table and I do a select star and I read like 75 columns from a table, and I'm only going to need like, 12 going forward, right? I do something with all 75 at the beginning, but then by the time I get to the end, I only need these 12, right? Then I would cut those out of the pipeline so that I'm not passing around 75 columns when all I need is 12, right? So it's the same thing. If I've got an object that's got a lot of values and a lot of properties, I mean, there are some objects with just dozens of properties, right? And I'm only gonna be working with 2 of them. Yeah, you can cut down on the memory and you can increase the speed of your script by doing a select those 2 you're going to work with, you keep your object, and then you just move them through the pipeline later on. Does that answer your question?
That does answer my question.
Okay. Now, another nice little trick is A equals get service. So, remember we get these guys for, right? Now if I want to see A, I just type it to the screen. Well, let's do this the fast way. So now, I've got the same type of object, right? So if I say A, pipe that to a get member, then you can see A is a service controller object. So you can set variables to commandlet output, right? And now if I want to see, and this is a very common way to do this. Now if I want to see something, if I want to say display name, because I'm doing services, right? I can just say a.display name, and I can get the display names of all the services. Right? So when you want to display a property of an object, I was going to say of a variable, but a property of an object, in this case it's cache A, right? $A. It's got all of these properties. You separate it with a period. $A dot property name. And I can only do those one at a time, right? I can't say $A period property name, comma, property name, comma, property name, right? You can't do that, right? And if I wanted to call one of the methods, if I wanted to do something, let's look at the methods here. There we go. So in here, there's a method called getType. And it's very simple, it just returns the type of an object that it is, right? But it's still a method. And you're gonna And you're gonna call all of these methods the same way regardless of what they do, right? Why is that?
Standardization.
Because the more things change, the more they stay the same. It doesn't matter what the method does, you still call it the same way. It doesn't matter what the SP does in SQL, right? You still call it the same way. So if I want to call get type on this guy, I'll say a dot get type. I love that new. And it tells me what type it is. And here it's just an object, right? Here I get the exact type name, but here it just comes through as an object, right? But you would see like system.string or system.int or something like that if it were a different type of variable. So that's how you call a method. And we're gonna see that when we, in this next hour, when we move all of this onto the SQL side and start looking at SQL stuff. We've got a little bit of stuff to do first, like we gotta do, we got a pipeline to like for each and where's, right? Show you how to limit the data. And then we're gonna move into SQL and show you how what? What I'm gonna show you in SQL.
How to retrieve
No.
data from the table.
No. That the more things change, the more they stay the same. Every bit of this translates directly into SQL without any extra thought or anything.
Break.
Break, I was told.
See you back here in 15 if you want. Come back in 15.